This is a presentation of BSRN, Box Studios Radio Network. The Power Play Post Show is on the air, covering minor league hockey since 2003, and now covering the Binghamton Black Bears with news, reactions, and in-depth interviews only heard here. And now from the Box Studios in Kirkwood, New York, here is your host of the Power Play Post Show, Bob Howard.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Power Play Post Show. This is the show for January 5th, 2025. This is season 14, episode number 33, and episode number 472 in the long-running podcast. It is the Power Play Post Show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the show. Thank you very much for joining me. I am Bob Howard, your host. Thank you very much for all the support. And what a weekend, right? I mean, what a weekend for the Binghamton Black Bears. A lot of goals for both teams, realistically. I think it was interesting to see the Port Huron Prowlers kind of break out of their shell a little bit and stop being, they were still a hack and whack kind of team because that's what they do. They're very good with their sticks. And when I say hack and whack, I don't mean it in a derogatory term, even though it probably sounds like it. I just mean it. They're good with their sticks. They get in the way. They frustrate the crap out of the people. But I wouldn't say that they're necessarily the high-scoring juggernaut that, the Black Bears are, right? So they don't rely on 7 goals or 3 goals or 5 goals or 6 goals to win a game. When they win games, it's usually close, contested battles. And even the game they won on Saturday, that was close, right? The whole game through, it was close. And it took the Black Bears being down 2 guys, and then maybe even the injury of Gavin Yates didn't help anything there. So without a doubt, the Black Bears had an interesting weekend. The win on Friday was kind of what we expect from the Black Bears. Even giving up 3 goals in a game, which doesn't happen that much for the Black Bears, it was still the game that you would expect from them. They dominate all 3 periods. They, go through the motions. They control the pace of the game, right? The puck control is really something that they heavily rely on, right? They want to be able to control the puck. And that's the thing with the Port Huron Prowlers. They don't let you make clean passes. They don't let you, control the puck for long because they will pinch on you a little bit. They will get their stick in the way. They'll get their stick on the puck and they'll start to move it away. Now, the Black Bears can kind of retaliate on that and do kind of something very similar, but you only have to do that when you're not in control of the puck. And generally, the Black Bears control the puck. I saw a stat, and I don't know if I was supposed to see it, but I did see a stat from one of the off-ice officials a couple weeks ago with the Black Bears. They won 60% of their face-offs. So that just tells you how much this team has the skill with the stick and their pucks. Now, of course, I talk about what Port Huron does without, but that's just the way they're taught. That's the way they are being coached by Matt Graham. And I do want to get to one more thing before I get to the real start of the show. We'll start breaking down these games. One of the things that I want to talk about is the Tucker Scantlebury thing. Okay, so he obviously uses his shoulder. It was up high. I wouldn't say it was completely, a headshot, but it was definitely up high. Rams Dan Weber into the boards for a boarding. It was an ugly play. It was not a good play, and it's not a play that they want in the league at all. Open ice hits, shoulder to shoulder, body to body, hip to hip, whatever, fine, okay. Do those all day long, right? Keep your head up, boys, right? That's what we always talk about, right? You got to keep your head up. So you got to watch what's going on. And I just don't think Dan Weber thought that was what Tucker Scantlebury was going to do. And he did it. The league just I don't know if they reviewed it. I don't even know if they looked at it. I stayed away from that topic with Coach Sherwood this weekend. I did reach out and just say, hey, listen, how is Dan? And he kind of told me how Dan was, and he's injured, and we'll see what happens this week. He will be assessed. He will be checked out by the trainer, Elise, to make sure that he is okay or not okay. And, he might be out for a little bit. That's just the way hockey goes. But how do we control how we feel about the league, not looking at it and not punishing him, right? Because if that was Dan Weber doing that to Tucker Scantlebury, would that have been an automatic suspension? Would Sherwood have to be arguing in it? Possibly, right? Because we've seen that before. It seems like they do not give any grace to the Black Bears, but they will certainly come down hard like a hammer on the Black Bears if they do something bad or something like that. But I think as fans, I don't think there's anything you can do, right? If you don't show up to the games, Andreas will shut the doors and go home. He'll take his bag of pucks and go home. So you have to show up to the games. I think screaming at the league officials doesn't really do any good. They don't care, right? They don't care about what the fans say. And I don't think that the commissioner, the vice commissioner, and the Department of Safety, when it comes to the FPHL, Dave Jackson, they don't care what the fans think and say. They're going to do what they want to do. I don't think there's absolutely anything that a fan can do to change it. So be upset about it, I guess, for a minute, and then move on, because the team has to. So if the team has to move on from this, and again, I've been frustrated with stuff like this for a long time, right? Daniel Amesbury, I've talked about it. How many, Danny Vanderweel, Gavin Yates, how many guys do we have to talk about that guy had to injure? And it took them a long time. They're not going to do anything. Then move on. Port Huron, it's in the past now, right? We don't play another game against Port Huron unless we meet them in the playoffs. It's done. It's over. Let's move on. Let's get the boys healthy. Go out to Motor City, beat Ricardo Gonzalez, beat Trevor Babin. Whoever they put in front of the Black Bears, they're going to beat them, right? So let's just move on from it and go from there. And honestly, the team lost their fourth regulation loss in 26 starts. Who cares, right? Let's just move on from it. And we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. All right. The Power Play Post Show is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, YouTube, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Just search Power Play Post Show on whichever platform you listen to your podcast, and please subscribe. Thank you for all the people who recently have been subscribing. I really do appreciate it. I know that the interview with MG Merkel went very good, and I know a lot of people kind of jumped on board because of that, and I hope to get some other interviews like that going on in the future. In this upcoming week, we might have a really great interview with Justin Barr. So I'm really excited about that. I hate to say that I'm getting the interview on bad circumstances because he was released from the Mississippi Seawolves. And I just want to be able to tell a story. I don't want to necessarily bash anybody or bash the Seawolves or the fans, because that's not what this is about. But I think Justin has a story that he wants to tell. And he loves that community. He really, really does. So we'll get into that. Hopefully, we'll get that set up with Justin. Please join the Power Play Post Show Facebook group. Just go to Facebook and search Power Play Post Show. Check out BinghamtonHockey.net for all your Binghamton hockey information and curiosity. And no, we do not have a guest. We don't have a 6 more questions. I wasn't going to do a 6 more questions with MG Merkel on Thursday, so we do not have a guest, but we do have a special segment that we're going to debut, and it's Around the Empire Division with Will Wiegelman. So if you watched any of his broadcasts this weekend, maybe you didn't want to watch Alex Jones and Eli Wirth this weekend, and you didn't. If you watched Will Wiegelman, he does an Around the Empire Division. Now, it's a video, but he sent me the audio so I can play that here. So in between the two games breakdown, we'll run that through, right? It'll give you last weekend's information and what happened in Around the Empire Division. So it's a pretty cool segment. We're going to put that in between my two breakdowns of these two games. All right, so let's go through this. So the Black Bears split the weekend in Port Huron, and I am 100% okay with a split. They made it to 60 points on Friday night. I'm okay with the loss on Saturday, and so should you. Sounds like a political ad, right? I don't mean it to be. All right. Win on Friday night, 7-3. In the first period, continuing his hot streak, and yes, he's on a hot streak, Dakota Bond scored the game's first goal on the power play, 8-11 into the first period, while the Prowlers, Dan Chartrand, was in the box for high-sticking Gavin Yates, scoring one of his typical garbage-style goals in front of the Prowlers netminder. Tyson Kirkby added to his league lead in goals with his 22nd of the season, giving the Black Bears a 2-0 lead. And I'll tell you right now, he is the king at getting those garbage-type goals, just being in front of the net and hacking and whacking. And in some cases, the little bit of a, moving the puck around a player or a goaltender while the goaltender's trying to slide to make the save. Tyson gets those goals as well. It's just the way he works around the net is kind of masterful, and he's kind of showing that right now. And Tyson Kirkby, maybe at the end of the show, we'll talk a little bit about some of his numbers and what he's done. All right, the Prowlers did get on the score sheet after a nice wrister by Brett Lockhart that beat Binghamton's goaltender, Nolan Egbert, with 2:30 to go in the period, making this a 2-1 game. Okay, first period notes. The Prowlers' stick work when they're on defense is so good. They get the sticks on the puck, and they get in the way of the Black Bears every time they meet. This game was getting feisty, and they were just 8 minutes into the game, so that was something that I took note of there. But it was feisty all weekend long, let's be honest. It just really was. The first period goal for Tyson was his 100th goal of his Black Bears career and is now only 9 goals away from the franchise lead of 109 held by Nikita Ivashkin, and he's making even more Binghamton hockey history as the weekend goes along. Nusinainen looked very good in the period. He really did. And honestly, the Black Bears make netminders look so good because they take so many shots, and their save percentage is so high just because the Black Bears aren't scoring 15 goals in a game, but sometimes they're shooting 60 shots in a game, right? So they make the goaltenders look good, even when they're maybe just okay. The Lockhart goal was a nice wrister that just beat Eggie. Otherwise, he had a good period as well. Eggie did. One thing I noticed, though, the Prowlers are getting their sticks down, and in the way, the Black Bears are still getting the crisp passes connected. So one thing that I noticed this weekend is the Black Bears definitely were able to move the puck a little bit better than they were in the previous games against the Prowlers. Now, I think on Saturday night, there were some extenuating circumstances that made it difficult for the Black Bears. But Scantlebury and Kirkby at the end of the period had to be separated, leading to what could be matching minors 4-on-4 hockey to start the second period. Shots on goal in that period were 16 for Binghamton, and Port Huron had 11. Now in the second period, with Dan Chartrand again in the penalty box, this time for roughing, and an unsportsmanlike double minor, Chris Mott scored a power play goal at the 11:40 mark. The Black Bears then scored on the second half of Chartrand's double minor penalty with C.J. Stubbs' power play goal at the 12:31 mark, making this a 4-1 game. So Chartrand was a liability on Friday night for the Prowlers. He just was. He was in the box, and every time he went in the box, he then they gave up a power play goal. Dakota Bond then scored his second power play goal of the game at the 14:07 mark into the second period, putting the Black Bears up 5-1 with 4 power play goals of the 5 goals. Pretty crazy. After Scantlebury got a 5-minute major for boarding, that's the boarding of Dan Weber, Jesse Anderson got an interference penalty, putting the teams 4-on-4, but that still led to an Austin Thompson goal with 1:10 left to go in the second period. The Black Bears now have a 6-1 lead. And this, at this point, regardless of what was going to happen in the third period, this game was not going to get out of control for the Black Bears, and they were still going to win us. That was my belief. So second period notes, the Black Bears and the Prowlers indeed started the middle frame 4-on-4 as both Tyson Kirkby and Tuckle Scantlebury both received roughing penalties. The Prowlers came out like the Black Bears normally would as they poured on 7 straight shots on goal in the first 2 minutes and 36 seconds of the period before Kirkby got a shot on goal in the period. Okay, so that was pretty interesting. The Prowlers came out and boom, 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 boom. They were just taking shots like crazy. Dan Chartrand has been a bit of a liability for the Prowlers as he was in the box for 5 penalties in 10 minutes, which resulted in 3 Black Bears goals so far. So don't tell me somebody is a liability except for when they're in the box for 3 power play goals. That's a liability. But, I don't think he was on Saturday night. So whatever it was that he had to clean up, he cleaned up. The Prowlers started to fall apart after the Stubbs goal with the Dan Chartrand getting his 5th penalty of the game, but then Tucker Scantlebury also got one, giving the Black Bears a full 5-on-3 play. The Prowlers are trying to get very physical, and they continue to try to get physical, and they're getting caught for it and going to the box way too much, especially with Scantlebury's 5-minute major for boarding Dean Weber, who left the ice holding his left arm. Scantlebury also got a game misconduct for boarding. The league will likely review, which that's what I thought, and they didn't. Or they did, and they just decided not to do any additional disciplinary action. The Black Bears have 4 power play goals in this game through 2 periods, and a 4-on-4 goal as well. We'll be looking to see if Dan Weber comes out for the 3rd. As we know, he did not. He didn't play in the Saturday game either. At one point, Brant Sherwood and Chris Paulin were yelling at each other from the benches. Brant was not happy with that Tucker Scantlebury whack on Ramakers after and the 5-minute major boarding that he took out on Dan Weber. Okay, let's go into, shots on goal in that period were 12-11. Port Huron, because that early flurry in the first, I think it was like 2 minutes and 36 seconds, they had 7 shots on goal. Then they only got 4 the rest of the period. So Black Bears, again, dominate. Total after 2 periods, 28 shots on goal. Port Huron only had 22. Okay, let's go to the 3rd period. Now, in the 3rd period, the Prowlers got 1 behind Egbert, scoring their 2nd goal of the game just 2:40 into the 3rd period off the stick of Reginald Millette. The Prowlers' puck luck in the 3rd continued with another goal, this time from Prowlers leader Matt Graham at the 6:16 mark, making this a 6-3 game. And then you started questioning, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? But the last goal of the game was Austin Thompson scored the final goal of the game, a shorthanded empty net goal with 34 seconds left to go in the game to seal the 7-3 win for the Black Bears. Now, the 3rd period notes in this game, the Black Bears, Brant Sherwood seemed unhappy with the Prowlers' 3rd goal and wanted the referees to review it, which seemed like they did, but there were no change in the scoring. The Prowlers in the 3rd period were clearly getting the best chances and cashing in on those opportunities, at least in the early part. Through 7:40 of the period, the Prowlers had an 8-1 shots on goal in the period, which is crazy to think because that doesn't happen against the Black Bears. The Black Bears could not change the momentum in the 3rd period until the Prowlers took another penalty. Okay, so the momentum was there for the Prowlers, right, in the 3rd period. But then they took a penalty. Soon as they took that penalty, the rest of the period completely changed, and the Black Bears were able to control again. The Ben Brockway tripping penalty at the 9:27 allowed the Black Bears to take back control of the period, slowed down the Prowlers, who were gaining quality chances on Eggy. Other than a few minutes at the beginning of the 2nd period and the first half of the 3rd period, the Black Bears pretty much played a great game against a team that can get under their skin. However, the Black Bears have too much firepower. The Black Bears, in a rare period this season, were outshot in the final period by 5. However, they still scored in the period to negate one of the 2 goals that the Prowlers got on Eggy. Shots on goal in that period. Binghamton only had 6 shots in that 3rd period. Port Huron Prowlers had 11. Now, what I will say is the rest of the weekend, the Prowlers played like they did somewhat in the 3rd period of this game. So it was almost like the Black Bears played really good in 3 periods, maybe 4 periods if you count the 2nd period in the 2nd game. They played well. They scored 4 goals. You have to say that they played well. But in this game, shots on goal was 34 for Binghamton, and Port Huron had 33. That's pretty darn close. So I just want to say, they went in, and sometimes on Friday nights when the team travels, they don't always have their best game. They clearly had their best game on Friday night this weekend, right? I'm not calling anybody out about Saturday's game. It's a team effort. They were down 2 guys, and then Gavin gets injured. He plays sparingly in the third period. I don't think I saw him out there a lot. I did see him out there, so I know he did play. But it wasn't necessarily he wasn't out there, and he didn't have a big presence, let's just put it that way, in the third period on Saturday's game. So, all right, let's get to it right now. Being that this is the Port Huron theme, right? But we've got Around the Empire Division with Will Wiegelman. We'll be right back after Will takes you and gets you updated on the Empire Division right here on the Power Play Post Show.
Works down the wall. Gokaryev centers, comes all the way out for Shinkarik. Shinkarik drops the shoulder to the net. He scores. Carter Shinkarik completes the comeback for the Lobsters as the Prowlers fall tonight in Athens.
If you're a Binghamton hockey fan, then you need to check out binghamtonhockey.net for all your news, stats, information, the Binghamton Hockey Hall of Fame, top 10 lists, profiles, and so much more. That's binghamtonhockey.net.
You're listening to the Power Play Post Show.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Power Play Post Show. I hope we can make that a weekly thing. If we can get Will to continue to send that to us from the Port Huron Prowlers, I think it's a pretty cool thing to just kind of have that extra, thing that tells you what's going on in the Empire Division. And I think that would be pretty cool. He does a great job putting those together. So hopefully here for the remainder of the season, we can possibly get Will to send those to us at least once a week, and then we can put them here on our Sunday show. Just giving you a little bit more information about the FPHL and, of course, the Binghamton Black Bears and the Empire Division. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Saturday night's game. I just want to say beforehand, what's very interesting about the Black Bears the last two seasons, right? Obviously, the team has played very, very well. The team has a ton of wins. Probably, last year you could probably argue that maybe Columbus and Carolina were as good as Binghamton. Binghamton obviously showed Carolina how good they were in the finals and beat them. Carolina beat the Columbus River Dragons. So I'm just saying that clearly Binghamton's been very good. And yet today on social media, there are people arguing about things that have to do with the Black Bears, right? Like somebody wants to criticize a player or have an opinion about a player, and then people are criticizing the person who's criticizing. It's just kind of craziness, right? It's like, guys, relax. Just wake up the next day. And yeah, you want to talk about it, and it's all sports. And I'll tell you right now, I can't tell you how many times Michael McCarthy has gotten a big FU from me. Matter of fact, today they lost their final game of the season, and just before I started recording this, they let Washington go run down in the final 2 minutes of the game and beat them. And yeah, I hope Mike McCarthy does not come back to the Dallas Cowboys, right? So I do think that in some cases that we can do that. But let's be honest, to kind of defend the Black Bears here just a little bit, they're still the first team and the only team to 60 points, the only team to 50 points at this point as I'm recording this, even though there's a game to be played today, and I think that team could potentially get to 50. My point is, everybody take a deep breath. Relax. It's a loss. Who freaking cares? I care more about these guys who were possibly injured and Dan Weber, who obviously, we hope comes back. He's a big body on the ice and we need him, right? That's more important than was the defense great. What's wrong with Connor McAnanama? Nothing. It's a bad freaking game. Everybody has one. Move on, okay? Now, again, if I think somebody's dogging it, I'm going to tell you. If someone takes a bad penalty, I'm going to tell you. If somebody does something that gets suspended, I'm going to tell you because that's okay. It's okay to make those types of criticisms, right? And if someone gets offended by that, go cry a river somewhere, okay? This is sports. If any of these people were in any other major city in this country, from Chicago to New York to Philadelphia. I mean, Philadelphia sports talk people would kill you. The fans will kill you. If you sniffle just the right way, they're going to burn you. So just calm down. Everybody just needs to relax. This is Binghamton, New York. It's the best team in the league. Just let it be, okay? They lose Saturday night 8-6. All right, so let's get through this because this is going to take about 90 minutes just to do this. After a quick 4-minute double minor assessed to Austin Thompson, the Prowlers scored on the first half of the power play with a goal from Joel Frazee just 1:41 into the game. Okay, so he had a double minor. It is what it is. The Black Bears tied the game at the 10:35 mark with a 5-on-3 power play goal at the 10:35 mark of the first period off the stick of C.J. Stubbs. So C.J. Stubbs scores on a 5-on-3. Seems like Black Bears are getting a lot of 5-on-3 goals recently, which is good. That means that you're taking advantage of that advantage because that's a good advantage. After a turnover in the Black Bears defensive zone, the Prowlers took a 2-1 lead. So there you go. So this is a play right here where people might criticize this, because I've said this multiple times on this show. The thing that the Black Bears suffered the most from over the past 2 years, actually the past 3 years maybe, right? Even when they had Kyle Powell, who's a great puck-moving defenseman, they turned the thing over all the time. And then there would be these breakaways in front of the netminders, whether it was Riley McVeigh or whoever, right? So even when you have the 4-time or 3-time, whatever he was, defenseman of the year, you're going to have turnovers. But it's the thing that got my goat for a long time. So, but after a turnover, the Prowlers took a 2-1 lead with 48 seconds left to go in the period off the stick of Stefan Deasy. Now, the thing that drives me bonkers more is when you allow a team to score on you in the first 2 minutes and the last 2 minutes. I don't know. For some reason, somebody sometime a long time ago said nobody should ever score on you 2 minutes into the period or 2 minutes at the end of the period. I don't know why that bothers me, but it does. Black Bears did not get the start they wanted as Tomer took a double minor right off the first shift of the game, which led to the Freezy goal early. Obviously, that's not how they wanted this. You know, Austin Thompson does not take dumb penalties that often. He does, but I think the team was still kind of reeling from the Dan Weber thing, and they really wanted to let people know. But when Thompson took those penalties, he and Matt Graham dropped the gloves, thinking that this might not be. I thought this might not be the night's last fights, but it was. Apparently it was. Black Bears got a full 5-on-3 when Federley and Scanterbury got 2-minute minors at the 10:04 mark, which did lead to a Stubbs power play goal. It was so interesting, right? Because you saw the referee's arms go up, and then they also called Scanterbury as well. So Federley got the first penalty, I believe, and then Scanterbury got the second, which is crazy. Gavin Yates was injured in the collision in the offensive zone at the 11:19 mark of the first period, making his bench even shorter. Okay, so now the bench is even shorter because you got no Dan Weber. You're already down a man coming into the weekend, and then, boom, Gavin's off the ice, right, at 11:19 of the first period. Ben Brockway then in the same corner went down. This was the shift right afterwards, okay? Ben Brockway in the same corner went down, and the trainer had to come out of the Black Bears locker room from attending to Yates to attend to the down Prowler, Ben Brockway. So that was just a weird thing to happen. I mean, again, this was just a weird game. This has been a chippy game, and the referees are trying to do everything they can to keep the players in check. Big question will be, will we see Gavin Yates return for the second period? A bad turnover in front of Connor McAnama did not help the cause with the second goal of the game. Shots on goal in the first period were Binghamton 12, Port Huron 6. Now, if you look at the amount of goals versus shots on goal for the Prowlers, it's a crazy number. In the second period, the Black Bears tied the game up at 2 goals apiece as Caden Henry scored 3:17 into the middle period. Great to see Henry score. Great to see the third line get on board. Chris Mott gives the Black Bears a 3-2 lead, scoring his second of the weekend at the 4:54 mark. You put Chris Mott in the right situation, he's going to produce. I truly believe it. I believe he's got the skill to hang with the boys on this team. Same thing with Cade Henry. I really do. And Scott Ramakers, he can play on a first line, right? He may not be in the first line depth chart, right? But if you put him up there, he can play up there, okay? The captain, Tyson Kirkby, scored a power play goal very quickly at the 5:13 mark. As Brian Parsons was in the box for roughing after the Mott goal. So Mott goal happens, and Brian Parsons gets pissed off, and he gets a roughing penalty, which leads to the Tyson Kirkby goal. Again, so many things tied together in this game. It's crazy. The Prowlers then scored at the 11:22 mark of the period to make this a 4-3 game after Brian Parsons shot past Connor McAnama. So Parsons goes in the box for roughing. Tyson gets the goal. And then he scores after coming out a little bit later on, right? 6 minutes later. But no more than 27 seconds later, the Prowlers' Alex Johnson tied the game at 4 goals apiece. So we went from the Black Bears leading the game 4-2. Boom, now it's tied. Okay, keeping the second period exciting, I guess, the Black Bears retake the lead at the 14:54 mark of the period when Austin Thompson scored a goal, in which the Prowlers asked the referees to look at, but it was called a good goal. Well, I thought it was called a good goal. Tucker Scandalberry made this a 5-5 game 1 minute and 22 seconds after the Thompson goal, after he sent a slap shot past McAnanama. Okay, so let's break down what really happened in parts of this second period. Gavin Yates was back on the ice. He was first seen after the Black Bears took the lead during the second period, and he was just like testing out his how sometimes players will get injured and they'll come back out, and if it's a lower body, they'll go out there and test their legs and their ankles and their skates just to make sure that everything feels good. And we did see him play. Now, the Black Bears scored 3 goals in just a minute and 56 seconds early in the middle period. Henry at the 3:17 mark, Mott at the 4:54 mark, and then Kirkby at the 5:13 mark. Do you remember, I think it was a little bit last year and last season, the Black Bears would do this every once in a while, where they would score 2 or 3 goals really quick, right? And it just seemed like this also was going to happen. All right, the Prowlers' defense was definitely faltering, and when you do that, the Black Bears are going to take advantage. But again, the Black Bears' defense was faltering as well. The Black Bears scored 4 goals in the second period for the second straight night. The Prowlers were insistent that the Thompson goal was not across the line, but it didn't look like the referees would review it. Now, what we found out later on, they couldn't review it. Apparently, the system, the iPad system where they have connection to these cameras that are in all the rinks now, wasn't working. The Prowlers were okay. So the two teams have 7 goals between the two teams. 4 for the Black Bears, 3 for the Prowlers, the most combined in one period for Binghamton this season. This was a messy period for both teams at different times, at least on the defensive side. Obviously, the offense looked good for both teams because they scored 7 goals. The Prowlers in the second period took too many men penalties. Both penalties were served by Tucker Scandalberry. Now, a lot of times in the middle period when you're in your home rink, right, you're crossing over, and sometimes it's difficult to get players on and off. And this happens every once in a while to teams. I'm going to guess that this doesn't happen often to Port Huron, but sometimes it can. You get into this weird rhythm where your guys are coming on, and coming off, and every once in a while things will just happen. I got to imagine they'll play another 5 home games and not have this happen. But it's just a weird thing. Connor's numbers are going to look not as pretty as they were. But with the two teams down to 14 skaters, I cannot totally blame him. But it will take a few games for his numbers to get back down again. And I'm talking really about goals against average, getting back down below 2. What an ugly period that was. I think defensively you could say that. I think offensively everyone's going to be like, hey, they scored goals. It's great. Shots on goal, Binghamton 16, Port Huron 10. Binghamton 28 for the game, and Port Huron 16. All right, let's get to the third period. Getting his second dirty goal of the game, Austin Thompson gave the Black Bears a 6-5 lead with 6:54 going into the period. So if you think about it, the Black Bears had the lead 2 or 3 times in this game. So they weren't out of it. But sometimes another team just has your number in this game, but not necessarily in the season, right? Just in the game. The Prowlers scored a power play goal just 1 minute and 40 seconds after Reggie Millette tied the game at the 8:34 mark. Not to be outdone, Stefan Deasy scored the Prowlers' 7th goal of the game at the 11:26 mark of the third period, putting the home team up by a goal in a 13-goal game. Alec Johnson scored the 3rd goal for the Prowlers in the period, making this an 8-6 game at the end, at the 15:14 mark, and that's how it ended, 8-6. Third period notes, the Prowlers play-by-play broadcaster Will Wiegelman announced that in the third period, the replay system was not working when the Prowlers protested the Thompson goal. With that being said, it would not be used anymore in the game. right? Because it's an unfair advantage, right? Which makes sense. Not sure how to describe this game. It was ugly at times, I guess. It was the worst game of the season for the Black Bears, maybe. So many goals, so many broken plays, but the Black Bears were never really out of this game. You have to think about that, right? They were never really out of this game. Was Connor at his best? I don't think he was, right? You know, and is it okay for him to have a bad game? Sure. He went the last 8 or 9 games not giving up more than 2 goals, right? So he's allowed to have one of those games. It's okay. Was the defense at their best? Maybe not, right? So we can say that. But I'm sure with the short bench, the Black Bears were tired after being down 2 guys. Gavin was not 100%. There's no way he was. Nobody can lie to me and say, oh, yeah, no, he was 100% when he came back. No, during the game. So there may be many factors for this for the Black Bears. Okay? So this isn't just one guy did terrible. We're not blaming this on Connor. We're not blaming this on any particular defenseman, right? We're basically just going to say this was just a game where they were short players and it caught up with them. And it was on the road. The home team had the advantage. They had a lot of fans there. Black Bears had some fans there. They traveled. Great on them. Awesome to hear those fans there. I think Ashley, Heather, and I know there were players, family there. So there was some cheers when you heard the team score, right? I think Austin Thompson had family there. Dakota Bond had family there. So there were fans there. But you're in Port Huron's arena, right? So this is going to happen. Basically, the Black Bears need to get healthy. They need to get through the next weekend trip to Michigan. Black Bears did try to pull McAnanimo with 4 minutes left to go in the game, but they were not able to score. But even after a few shots, Port Huron couldn't get an empty netter either. Brant Sherwood and Chris Paulin again did have words after the game was over. I'm sure Brant was not happy still about the Weber hit. And the other quote-unquote headhunting type plays, right? So take that for what it's worth. Shots on goal in the period, Binghamton 6, Port Huron 9. A total of Binghamton 34 and Port Huron 25. You know what? Binghamton doesn't lose that often when they outshoot the other team, but in this particular game, they did. So one last thing before we go today, I want to bring up a couple of different things. The first thing is Tyson Kirkby, okay? So I put a post out there, and I know some of you guys have already seen it and read it. Tyson Kirkby right now is in the top 10 of points all time in Binghamton hockey history, and so in 52 years, I've got it up on the binghamtonhockey.net website where you can look at it, but Tyson Kirkby is number 9 right now with 223 points. But the other thing that is pretty cool, right, is that there have been only 7 other people than Tyson Kirkby to score at least 100 goals in Binghamton hockey history as a Binghamton player, right? Started off with Rob Bloomfield and Denny Amell. They both have 203. Now, Denny played in the AHL. Rob Bloomfield played in the North American Hockey League. And I think parts of one season in the AHL when the team went over to the AHL, right? But they both have 203 goals scored. Randy McGregor has 190, right? He was mostly AHL. Chris Greenville from the Icemen, so the UHL days, had 160 goals. Okay. Paul Fenton had 120 goals. Nikita Ivashkin from the Black Bears had 109 goals. Ross Yates has 102 goals. And then Tyson Kirkby has 101 goals, right? So he has really started to make his mark. Obviously, Nikita is 8 goals ahead of Tyson right now. And I think by the end of the season, all things being said, Tyson Kirkby is going to pass Nikita Ivashkin. He'll be in 6th place. And then he'll be marching up on Paul Fenton. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get to Paul Fenton and be number 5 in Binghamton hockey history. I do believe also, if I look at the assists, he is in he's in the top 13. So he's 13th right now in assists in Binghamton hockey history with 122 assists. But those two, the goals and the assists, get him up there in points with 223. I wanted to throw that out there those numbers out there because I thought that was pretty cool. Good milestone for Kirkby. He's also got, 23 goals and 28 assists for 51 points right now in the Fed this season. I think he's like 12 or 13 points ahead of the next person in points. Goals are close, and obviously assists are close, but nobody's doing it consistently in both categories like he is on the season. Connor McAnana's numbers dipped a little bit. His career numbers didn't. He's still got some pretty darn good career numbers, but his season numbers dipped a little bit. When you give up 8 goals, well, it's a team thing, but when you give up 8 goals as a goaltender, that's just going to happen. But Connor's going to bounce back. I can guarantee you that. That's just the way he is. So they got the 2 games coming up. We should have a pretty cool interview this upcoming weekend. We'll obviously preview Motor City. We haven't played against them yet, so we'll preview the Motor City games for you. But we should also have a pretty interesting interview with. Actually, we did play Motor City. We played them at home 4-2, but this will be the first game in Motor City for the Black Bears since last year, since the playoffs, actually. So we'll preview the Motor City games. We'll talk about that 4-2 win that they had on just before Christmas break for the Black Bears, and hopefully we'll have this really good interview with Justin Barr, who was formerly the captain of the Mississippi Seawolves. We're going to bring him on. We're going to talk to him, find out maybe what happened a little bit down there and why the team was not performing as well as I think he would have liked and anybody else would have liked. So that's pretty much it for me on this edition. So the Power Play Post Show is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, YouTube, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Just search Power Play Post Show on whichever platform you listen to your podcast. And please subscribe. Please join the Power Play Post Show Facebook group. Just go to Facebook and search for Power Play Post Show. Check out binghamtonhockey.net. That's where I just now looking at the all-time assists and goals and points. For all your Binghamton hockey information and curiosity, please check out binghamtonhockey.net. And I want to thank Rob Lapoulis, our MC, John Petitucci, our music director, and I want to thank Will Wiegelman for sending us the new segment that hopefully we can bring you every single week, which is Around the Empire Division with Will Wiegelman. So hopefully we can do that again as the weeks go on. I am Bob Howard. Thank you very much for listening, and be nice to each other. Come on, guys. It's just hockey. It's just hockey. It's just a game. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Power Play Post Show.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Power Play Post Show. Be sure to tune in next week to the Box Studios Radio Network for all the latest Black Bears news and interviews from around minor league hockey. The Power Play Post Show would like to thank John Patitucci for all the music you hear on the show. You've been listening to the Power Play Post Show.